All right, everyone, this is Tim with Northern Woods Wellness, and welcome to week 10 of Find Your True North podcast series. I'm going to call you All My Fighters. If you remember that from last week, I'm very proud of it. That's why I keep bringing it up. But welcome to week 10, and I apologize for the week gap. We had a really busy summer week, so I wasn't able to get around to it. Part of that was because it was my birthday, so I apologize, but I was able to celebrate my wife's birthday on the 19th and then my birthday on June 23rd. So it was a little busy. But here we are back at it again for week 10 and continuation of Men's Mental Health Month. So we're going to still stay on track with that, but just a little bit behind. So we'll still stay on the same topic. But if you have any questions or anything, feel free to give us a call, 715-598-1568, or email us at info@northernwoodswellnessllc.com. So without further ado, let's dive right on into Men's Mental Health Part 2. And this is a three-part series. Last week we talked about communication styles, and then this week we're talking about men's emotional or affect regulation and how that tends to look and how men can do well and how men maybe struggle with the affect regulation and how you might be able to support them. That is the main goal of this whole entire series is how do you support men and their mental wellness? Because when men's mental health improves, it appears that everyone's mental health improves because of the historical challenges that particularly Caucasian heterosexual men have had on our history of humanity. So when we improve men's mental health, everything seems to improve. At least that's my theory. So when it comes to affect regulation, basically the definition of affect or emotional regulation is a human's ability to process and to regulate an emotion when it arises. It's a pretty straightforward definition based off of the name. But I want you to think about that in the context of men's mental health. Men do not regulate emotions very well. Men don't know their emotions. So, how do you regulate emotions if you aren't able to identify their emotions, especially if emotions in history have been stifled or no permission has been given to that male to let out their emotion? Granted, this isn't just for men, everyone does this, but because of the context of Men's Mental Health Month, we're speaking in the context of just men. But men are brought up with the idea that emotions are not healthy, they're not going to be beneficial for them. Therefore, a lot of men at a very young age just dismiss them. And when they dismiss them, they're really dismissing their ability to regulate any sort of emotion, which is really concerning. Because when you're in relationships, everyone has to regulate emotions. Every relationship is a two-way street. When you have an employment relationship, when you have a parent child relationship, and whatever it might be, we have to regulate our emotions. Otherwise, it's not going to turn out well. You can kind of see that maybe in other adults or children, but you probably see adults have temper tantrums all the time. They really do because we're still unable to regulate that emotion. And men do have a lot of temper tantrums. Typically, men are the ones that are kind of found in jail. They're the ones that are struggling more often with substance abuse. They're also struggling with more suicide. So there is a clear research and empirically based image of how men's mental health is when it comes to regulatory skills. And there's not a lot of really good ones. It is getting better, I will say, even in the last 10 years since I have been doing this type of work, it does seem that more and more men, even the men you think would never touch a therapy office, are coming in and they're enjoying it. So that's really cool to see. But it's hard to get men into therapy. So, how can we support men's affect or emotional regulation without pushing too hard on therapy? Because if you push too hard on therapy, you do run the risk of pushing that person away. All genders, that is something to think about. So, what I like to look for is a side door, not just battering ramming it in, but how do you find a side door to get through to that person and to create awareness for that person? That's really all we're trying to do when it comes to supporting a male in their efforts of emotional regulation is to find a side door to point out how they may not be regulating very well or how they even are regulating well. You want to do that compliment sandwich or what we'll call emotional regulation sandwich. You're doing this well, struggling here, but you're doing this well too. That is the best way to approach things, I think, seem like, especially in my therapy office with anybody who might be wanting to make a change in something that I feel might be really beneficial for their life. But you can do that too. Maybe you have a partner who struggles with regulating emotions. They keep blowing up in anger, or they keep walking away saying that this marriage isn't working. whatever it might be. You don't want to allow them to just walk away because what's happening there is that person is now avoiding that concern. It's good to let them walk away for 5 minutes, but make sure you come back to it. That is the problem, I think, most often in all of our emotional regulation, but particularly men, is they need to take a break or they say, I need to take a break. I don't have time for this right now. They walk away and they never come back to it. And if you think about that as a partner of a male, that partner might fight and fight, fight to not let that person go because they know that if that person walks away, we're never revisiting this conversation. So they fight really hard to not let that person walk away, which in turn causes more of that reactive explosion. So I'll say that a little bit clearer. The male often feels uncomfortable when it comes to emotions, so they want to get away from it, which is good if you need to distract, but the goal is to come back and talk about it with you. But if you're a person who knows that that male is going to walk away and never come back, it's now avoidance. And then that other partner is going to chase after them because they know that we are never going to talk about this again. And then that is going to cause a huge conflict. So just know that when it comes to men, you may have to let them walk away, but maybe you need to set parameters around the aspects of that. We do need to come back to this in about 10 minutes. I would say never go longer than even 30. I would recommend 5, 10 to 15 minutes if you are going to let anyone walk away just to calm down. Because if you wait too long, we're going to forget about what we're arguing about. We're going to forget how we feel. And the chance for change and progress just gets smaller, it seems, as that gap gets bigger. So try to keep it more immediate in the present moment. And you don't want to pull on past experiences too. You might actually see that a lot in men. Men tend to defend themselves too much, and yours truly does that as well. I've gotten better at it. But when I get in an argument with my wife, I will try to pull on things maybe that aren't even relevant to the argument. That's just me feeling cornered and wanting to, or my brain going into that amygdala, that limbic system, and going into that fight, flight, or freeze mode. And depending on who the person is, they could fight you, they might just shut down, or they might walk away. So you have to almost think about, what is your male partner doing? Is your male partner a fighter? Are they coming back at you hard? That's probably they're a fighter then. Are they just shutting down when you have a conversation with them? Or are they getting up and walking away? You have to kind of know what type of person you're dealing with. I truly believe everyone has a fight, flight, or freeze response, but there are aspects of our fight, flight, or freeze response that people tend to gravitate towards. So ask that about yourself. When your partner, male, female, non binary, when they come to you, ask yourself, am I a fighter, a flighter, or a freezer? There's also even fawn in there, fawner, which is just kind of longing for just things to be better, just to make yourself feel better. But ask yourself what you are. Then you can kind of know, how are impulsive, emotional arguments going to go or conversations going to go. You probably know you're going to walk away or want to, and we're going to have to challenge that. So think about that for men. Most men tend to seem to be fighters and flighters. I see more flighters, they walking away, than I do fighters, but both are really, really common to male emotional regulation. But we want to make sure that that is a coping skill, not an avoidance skill, because avoidance is there all the time. But men avoid, avoid, avoid. It's rooted in our DNA from years and years and years of emotional avoidance and lack of emotional regulation. So if you're supporting a partner, especially male, and you want them to know that they are avoiding, what I encourage you to use is say what I'm saying today, but also say, okay, we can distract, but let's not avoid. Let's come back to this and be really straightforward, really direct, but also compassionate. Being compassionate and empathetic doesn't mean you have to just roll over and, and just let them do what they need. It means that this is what I need. Here's my conditions. This is when we're going to meet again. If you're not there, then that is going to tell me that this is going to hurt even more. Set those conditions, even if you know it's going to be a challenge, because then you're showing to that male that we can distract and still talk about this. We don't always need to avoid. The male brain is going to go right to avoidance. I don't know why that is. I think it's because of emotional conditioning. Just avoid, avoid, avoid. Emotions show weakness. So you are combating years and years of emotional priming for that male that says that these emotions are not really important or that they're dangerous, therefore avoid. But we're trying to teach men to not avoid, but to distract from the emotion for a bit, calm down, come back to that emotion. I know I've used the context of conversations, calm down, walk away, come back to that conversation. But think about this in just a male's emotional processing. Maybe they feel an emotion and they avoid it, they just walk away from it. What we want men to do is feel that emotion, distract for a little bit if it's uncomfortable, but then make sure you come back to it, whether it's through journaling, just having a timed conversation with somebody or going to therapy. Because when you do those things, you're not avoiding, you're processing. Because when you talk about it, you're processing. That's why I think therapy is so great for men, because you can kind of say, hey, you talked about your emotions for 1 hour this week. Go ahead and distract from what we talked about because now you've processed. It's no longer avoidance. But next week, let's talk more about where we're at, and then you can know you processed, and then go ahead and distract. It's just kind of this healthy balance of process, distract. No room for avoidance when it comes to emotional regulation, but you will see men try to avoid time and time again. I see it in my office all the time. And I'm sure if you're a woman, if you're non binary, if you're living with a male, I'm sure it's frustrating because I know it is. I know it's frustrating from my experience of being male, being a therapist, and also being a husband. I have to really challenge myself and just say, what am I avoiding? And I don't even really know until someone says, are you avoiding this? That's where therapy comes in for men and is so good. So if you ever are wanting to get your partner, a male partner, into therapy, bring up the idea of that the human brain is just going to avoid. It's not even your decision. So don't blame yourself for avoiding. But please know that that is a tendency that's inherent to you and that avoidance is only going to lead to longer term challenges and that distraction is a good alternative to avoidance. But make sure you're coming back to process. So if you have any questions on this, feel free to let me know or give us a call at Northern Woods. You can call us at 715-598-1568. We do couples therapy. We also do individual therapy as well. So if you are a male, if you are non-binary, if you're a woman, whatever it might be, we are willing to help you with this aspect of emotional regulation. And even if you have someone you know that is struggling with emotional regulation, particularly a male, since it is Men's Mental Health Month, we are able to kind of help teach you how to support that. And the biggest thing a lot of times when you're supporting a male is you have to hold them firmly, confidently, and empathically. And that can be really challenging if you're not comfortable with conflict resolution because this conversation does have the ability and probably will spark some emotional conflict. But remember, conflict is not bad. Conflict shows that we are just talking about these emotions. And if no one's having conflict, then I always wonder who's not saying something. If I have a couple who comes in and says, no, we're good, we never fight, I wonder immediately who's not saying something because we're human. That's what we do. Maybe you have a really healthy relationship, but we all have opinions and biases. We want to air that out. Otherwise, it's just going to lead to long term resentment, lack of communication, or limit the benefits that you could have. Think about if we don't talk, we're limiting the potential for a truly, truly wonderful life and perfect relationship. It's never gonna be perfect, but if you don't talk about the concerns, if you just bite your tongue, that's avoidance, and it's limiting your growth. It's limiting your ability to feel safe and comfortable in your relationship. So once again, thank you for joining us. Sorry for the late podcast episode this week. You can find us on Spotify, also on YouTube if you're watching on YouTube. We look forward to talking to you next week for our last week of Find Your True North podcast. And we also, of the men's series. And then we have one more after that. So we have two more episodes of this season of Find Your True North podcast. The next one that's coming up is going to be mostly focusing on men's mental health. And the one after that is going to be focusing on mindfulness and how to integrate everything that you are hearing in these podcasts or throughout your life. So I'll be walking you all through a nice mindfulness meditation to close out season 3 of Find Your True North podcast. Hope all's well. Take care and let us know if you need anything else. Have a good one.